it's interesting to see how the big ideas of curriculum for excellence have become captured and distorted by quite different agendas in schooling. I'm thinking of one school I've come across where the staff have been issued with full capacity stamps and they're using them to reward children. You are a responsible citizen today, well done. And that sort of thing worries me greatly because we're losing sight of the big ideas. And to go back to our original arguments in the paper, the tension between the process elements of the curriculum, which I broadly welcomed, and the outcomes, which subsequently were described by even one of the architects, Keir Bloomer, as being a cul-de-sac, that tension has actually, I think, created multiple starting points for curriculum development, which potentially puts schools in very difficult positions, particularly given the sort of climate of multiple accountabilities, risk and so on, which many decisions in schools are accompanied by. So we're seeing, for example, that it's easier to mould the new curriculum to existing forms of practice and to carry on as business as usual, rather than actually embracing it as a genuine opportunity to transform education, as I think the original architects would have intended.
It allowed for a much more ambitious restructuring of the curriculum than subsequently developed. And one sense is that, the traditional subject departments lobbied quite strongly for the retention of their position in the curriculum. Okay, there is some softening at the edges. You have something like health and well-being coming in and being given a fairly important place. But there is an argument, again, not everybody accepts this argument, there is an argument that if you really want to change the curriculum, you need to dismantle the traditional subject fiefdoms in the secondary school. And teacher unions and organisations like the GTC have always resisted that very strongly, and all the signs are that they will continue to resist it. In some ways, moving towards specifications of outcomes is inconsistent with the emphasis on process, because if you say that the process of learning is what matters, very often you won't be able to specify the outcomes in advance. You will have to respond to the way the children respond, and so the outcomes in a sense are much more open-ended. Now there's an attempt in Curriculum for Excellence to soften the effect of that by having all the outcomes expressed in the first person from the point of view of the learner, and that seems to be learner-friendly and rather progressive. But of course it does lead to a certain degree of artificiality, whereby 5- and 6-year-olds are asked to sign up to statements that sound as if they perhaps are appropriate for 10- and 11-year-olds. The language is not really consistent with the stage of development of some of the youngsters. But from the point of view of teachers in schools, the messages are mixed.
Yeah. But again, the notion of active learning is an interesting one, because it suggests to me that this is a strategy or a set of strategies. It's not entirely clear, of course, what active learning is. Are we talking about physical activity, emotional activity, social activity, cognitive activity? That's not clear, and often the message we get back from schools is that teachers see it in terms of kinesthetic learning, in terms of getting kids out of their seats, and that's a worry. But I think it's symptomatic of a deeper problem here, which is the problem that we are putting strategies in place which are technical solutions to problems without actually thinking about what those problems are. And if the problem is construed as we need to develop people who are more active in the way they think, who have better critical thinking skills, then it is easy to derive methods from that which are active, cooperative learning, for example. But if we're starting from the other end and saying we need to do more active learning, then the approach is very easily going to be, well, on Friday afternoon, period 5, I'm going to slot an activity in which I can say is active learning. It's a tick-the-box, tweaking approach, which is quite dangerous and quite endemic, I think.
Yes.
The slogans, but what we're not getting is a process of sense-making, and we're not getting a process where people can actually engage step by step in, these are the big ideas, these are the methods and content which are required for those big ideas. This is what's going to be difficult in putting these into place, so we might have to change some of the context. This is our action plan to move forward. A lot of the more modern curriculum, which Young refers to as the sort of technical instrumental curricula, are really about cherry picking. They take the language from the progressive movement, from the process curriculum. They take the technicist aspects of the outcomes and experiences to develop outcomes. They've moved very much more to a generic view of knowledge, which in Jung's view downgrades the place of knowledge in the curriculum. And in view of, in fact, of people like Stenhouse and Dewey, who would have said that knowledge was important, albeit not a starting point for curriculum planning. So there are common trends around the world, I think, which Curriculum for Excellence is actually exemplifying and typifying.
It will be interesting to see how far the recommendations of the Donaldson Review on teacher education may actually assist the development of Curriculum for Excellence, because one of the recommendations has to do with the way in which primary teachers are trained, and the recommendation is that the existing B.Ed degree will be phased out, and that students will have to have a broader education that takes them beyond topics that are obviously educational in their implications or concerned with teaching. But that, of course, is a very long-term process, and in the meantime, the issues that you described and the limited impact across the system, that's going to be with us for a while.
I fear so.
That to make a reform such as Curriculum for Excellence effective, we need to look at much broader issues than simply the content of the curriculum, the aims of the curriculum. We need to look at the structures at national and local level which may or may not facilitate the process.
And there needs to be a two-way dialogue between the schools who need to say, hang on, we'd love to do this, but actually you need to sort this out before we can do it properly.
Yes, and it's interesting that in some areas there's now quite active discussion about the power of head teachers.
If teachers are going to be agents of change in a system which is less structured and less certain in many ways, then there are issues of capacity, curriculum-based capacity, for example, around do teachers understand the principles of curriculum development fully, but also issues around this notion of obligated freedom. We're telling you that you're going to be free now, but hey, we don't want to be free. We want to be told what to do, and that's not going to happen in the sort of system you're describing. So, we're perhaps going to see change, but perhaps we're going to see change with a lot of unintended consequences as well. So, there is a tricky balance here, isn't there, between providing the right levels of support and structure and process on the one hand, and allowing people the freedom and autonomy to develop that creatively on the other hand. So it sounds as if we've been quite negative about Curriculum for Excellence, but in fact, I have been characterised as an opponent following the publication of our recent paper. But my view is actually that Curriculum for Excellence is potentially a very positive development. It provides an opportunity which we haven't seen in a generation to transform the way that schools operate. And what's required, I think, is a decent process for engaging with that.
Following the video clip that you just watched with Walter and Mark, where they describe their interpretation of Curriculum for Excellence in terms of three curricular models: content, process and product. It's my understanding that they're moving towards the idea that Curriculum for Excellence is a content-delivered curriculum dressed up as a process-delivered curriculum. And this may have some limitations as how far it will transfer from Scottish education in the future.